All right, so we're going to talk about value add. We're going to talk about negotiations. I think negotiating is it's a very interesting thing, and not a lot of people, from what I've spoken with, actually understand what is up for negotiation when you are buying a piece of real estate. I'm actually going to run through a recent negotiation that it is currently unfolding at the moment for me. We are talking a higher purchase price. We're talking, $7, $8, $9, $10 million purchase prices. But I can assure you, like, what you can negotiate is really cool. All right, Joel, you fired up? I reckon you need to become like a main part of the attraction in your Joel. All right.
Nobody wants to see me.
They do. Look, they're fired up. They said, Joel, you're drinking a fine liquor, or a liquid right there, which is your monster. All right, so let's do it. Value. I'm just confirming you can see that still. I need to move it this way. Yep, cool. Value add. So now, when we are talking value add, and I'm going to run you through a recent case study, which was 132 Elder Street in Lambton. And essentially, this was a very, very successful renovation. We essentially doubled our money on the renovation, meaning we spent a couple of $100,000 and then we made $400,000 in value uplift. But there's a few reasons for it. It doesn't just happen via luck. There are, things that you need to understand when you are wanting to add value through a renovation. Now, if we talk specifically about this property, the first thing it had the perfect floor plan. And when I say the perfect floor plan, I mean it had a floor plan that had already been extended. So a lot of these older homes that we renovate, they have inefficient floor plans. They're very small, they're pokey. And even if you open them up, they're still small. Like, we open up a lot of, 3-bedders and make them 3-bed, 2-bath, open plan, living, kitchen, dining, but they're small. This one had already had the previous owners spend the money on the extension, right? Which is very expensive. To do an extension on a property like this, you're talking $300,000 to $500,000. They had already done the extension, which means it was a big 3-bed, 2-bath property. And the internal square meters makes a difference when you are getting a value to come through the property, right? Because they value properties based on the land size, the internal square meterage, location, improvements, all that jazz. So one of the big things is making sure when you buy a property to renovate, it has a good floor plan, and not just a good floor plan from a flow point of view, or a floor plan that you can turn into one that flows, a big internal footprint for the size of the property, because that will make the end valuation much better. So the floor plan was very good. Now, the second thing was the location. How good was that end? That's a nice end. If we talk about the location here, Elder Street in Lambton, one of the main streets that runs into New Lambton Village. Like, you walk out the front gate, you turn left, and you've got cafes and bakery and all this stuff. The park is right there. So the location, again, was second to none, which means all of the comparable sales around that property were really high, because they're obviously comparable sales that are selling in one of the best locations. Now, we've got location broken down into two things. There is micro and there is macro location. Macro location is when we're talking like region. So this was obviously in the Newcastle region. We're talking suburb. This was in the suburb of Lambton, obviously very popular suburb. And then we're talking micro. So it's like, well, whereabouts in the suburb is it? What street is it on? What side of the street is it on? Does it have a north-facing backyard? Is it quiet? All that stuff. There's micro location, and then we obviously have macro location, which is the region and the suburb itself. So the location for this property ticked both the macro location box and the micro location box. Now, the third thing that this property had, which was very good for us because it meant we had to spend less money and it was valuable, is it had the, what's the word that I'm looking for? It had the perfect layout. So let's say layout. Layout and floor plan are different. Now, when I say perfect layout, we didn't have to do any structural works, okay? So all of the works that we had to do were cosmetic in nature. For example, you already know that the property had the extension, so we didn't have to make it any bigger. The 3 bedrooms were at the front of the property, which meant all of the living and dining and kitchen was at the rear of the property, where the big open plan, section is. Great, no works needing to be done there. The main bedroom already had a bathroom, an ensuite added to it. Again, nothing we had to do. We just had to renovate what was there. Big tick. It had a big rear deck on the property. Again, we didn't have to add it. Big tick. Another thing, which is not an internal layout, but it's an external layout, because layout is internal and external, the layout of the property on the block was situated towards the front of the boundary, which meant there was no wasted space. So again, big backyard, and it made the use of the block itself. And then the final tick was it had side access, which means if you wanted to put a second dwelling, you could, but it meant you had, 2, 3, 4 car parks in that location. So the layout, second to none, ticked all the boxes, as well as the floor plan itself and obviously how that layout flowed. The location, great region, great suburb, and then great street inside of that suburb. And then the fourth thing that made this renovation very, very successful was the what are we looking for here? Let's say character. Was the character of the property. Okay? When I say character, I mean the property was like a property that was probably 80 to 100 years old. It had been updated throughout the years. Obviously, it wasn't a 100-year-old property that had never been touched. It had been updated. But when you renovate a property that has a huge amount of character, and I'm talking, like a beautiful facade, ornate features internally, it's elevated off the street with beautiful gardens and all the rest of it, it makes a huge difference. If you renovate something that looks like horse shit, it will still look like horse shit, but it'll just be a nicer looking horse shit. If you renovate a property that is beautiful already in terms of its, let's talk about it in terms of women's makeup, all right? This is probably going to offend some people, but anyway. If you have an ugly girl and you put makeup on an ugly girl, she's still ugly. If you have a pretty girl and you put makeup on a pretty girl, she looks even prettier. So that was a terrible example. But you get the point, all right? You can't make a shit property look pretty. And at the same token, newer properties generally also don't look as good renovating. Like if we're talking properties built in like 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, they don't look all that good renovated because they're not that old. So we love renovated character properties. Like Brisbane, we renovated a heap of character style homes, the Queenslander styles. They look really nice when they're renovated, and in Newcastle, exactly the same thing. So just to recap, floor plan, location, layout, and character of the home. I'm actually going to break these down for you in things. So if we talk floor plan, let me get some Mr. Swiggle shit happening for you. So that's a house, okay? So this is how the layout went. All right, so you come in the front door. There was a hallway, bedroom 1, bedroom 2. Where was the next bedroom? I can't remember. Pretty sure it was here, actually. Bedroom, that's right, and we had bathroom and stuff here. Kitchen, and then it had this like little area here. This was the rear bifold doors. Oh, no, that's right. It had this area here. It had the room there. That's right, yeah. Room there. And then this was the deck here. Okay, so this was the door. Bed 1, bed 2, bed 3, bathroom 1, and then this had a little ensuite here, which was bathroom 2. So you went through there. That was that. This was kitchen. And then this was open plan, living, kitchen, dining. So that right there, and this was like a little study here, which opened out onto this. So when we're looking at a property, we don't have to do any structural works to this, right? The bedrooms already are at the front of the property. The ensuite's there. And all we had to do was make it beautiful. Now, they have gone to the extent of putting all this section here would have been an extension that was done at some point. Like the house probably used to finish here, had tiny little, things happening, and they've put an extension on it, made it much better. That would be in today's environment, that would be a $300,000 to $500,000 extension, plus then renovating the existing house. So the property already had it. So if you can find properties like this where it has the really strong floor plan that you don't have to do a lot to other than make prettier, you save a huge amount of money, because as soon as you start doing structural works to properties, your budget just gets eaten up. So that's the kind of layout. Like, for example, we buy a lot of properties where you know, they might, like, they're stupid. Like, this might be the lounge room, for example. And then down here, there's a bedroom. And then the kitchen's here, and it's disjointed from the lounge room. And then they've got no outdoor entertaining area, and it's just a, you know, shitty little door. Like, we have to do a lot of work here, right? We have to turn the lounge into the bed. We have to get rid of this wall. We then have to do all the work that's required to remediate it, and it costs a lot of money, and you get the same outcome. So buy properties like that where the internal floor space is big, and like I said, these bedrooms were big bedrooms. It was big ensuite, big bathroom, big kitchen, living, dining. It was great, and people pay a premium for that. At the end, they pay. This property also rented, don't quote me on the exact number, but I believe it was around $1,200 a week, which is great for a house in this location. Okay, so that's what we're looking at there. Joel, any questions on the floor plan section before I move on? Mr. Squiggles, have we got any more paper? Oh, good. Okay. You know what I'm like with paper, bro. I get pretty excited. Okay. Location. I mean, I'm not going to draw location for you. It's pretty fucking self-explanatory. But the location box that this property ticked was, it was in a great suburb. Lambton is a great suburb. It's got a great village. It's quiet. It's got parks. It's all the jazz there. And also, it was in a really good street on the suburb. One thing that I will explain, though, is like, let's say that this is a typical village and Jesus is cross. Here it is. No, this this is the typical village, right? Like you've got your arterial roads that come through, and you've obviously got your shops here, and then you've got like all of your streets that sort of run off these streets, right? All of your little streets that run off here, and then there's houses in here, correct? And there's shops here, and there's houses here, okay? You generally don't want to be on these streets because they're really busy. They don't have a lot of privacy. People are constantly walking down them, and you will notice that most properties sell for less money on those streets. The kind of streets you want to be on are these ones, okay? You want to be on the streets that are just back from the main street, that are tree-lined, that you can literally walk out your front door, walk down, and you're within minutes of the main streets, but you're not on the main streets. So that's what I'm talking about, like macro location is like, Lambton is a great suburb, but for example, if you were on a main street where it's busy and, you know, these streets probably are okay to an extent because they might have like a 40 or a 50 kilometer speed limit. So they're not obviously really busy from a speed point of view, but like you get some of the other arterials where you might be able to do 60 to 80 Ks and they're noisy as well. So you always want to be off the main streets, but close enough that you can walk down there and get coffee and all that jazz. Cake, if you're into cake, if you want to get a sugar-free monster, you're literally only a hop, skip, and a jump away. All right, there we go. So that's location for you. Layout. This is actually a really interesting one, which not a lot of people think about. So this is a block of land. Okay, block of land. And let's say this is the road here. That's the road. You got your block of land. Now, there are a lot of different ways a property can be situated on a block of land. But, for example, what I think is a good block is one that has a usable backyard and one that doesn't waste space. So, the Lambton property that I'm talking about, the house was situated right to the front of the boundary, which means you had this nice side access here. And then you had a huge deck that come off the back here, and you had this all open space for a backyard. Now, if this property was situated just a little bit further back, so you had a front yard and a backyard, the backyard wouldn't have been usable, the front yard wouldn't have been usable, and you could have the same size block, meaning like, hey, I want to buy a 500 square meter block of land or a 450 square meter block of land, but one can be a lot more usable and feel a lot bigger than the other because obviously the house is situated in the right spot. And like I said, you've got side access, which is obviously where parking can happen. You could have put a big garage here or whatever. You could put a granny flat here, which could be fed by this side access. You're not wasting any space, and because the property was elevated, it felt really private as well. So that's the layout, both from an internal and an external point of view. Yes, Rob's the great man. How is he? Big Sharma. They're great. What was the last one? Character. I can't really draw character. I mean, you've seen me draw most things. It's not that trash hot. So anyway, you understand character, right? It's much easier to renovate an old home that has character than try to make a newer property that does not have a lot of character look pretty, I can assure you. Like, if you try and renovate a big brick 80s fucking shitbox, it's hard to renovate them things. Where if you renovate a house that's already got character and you've just got to paint, it's a great outcome. All right, so now you have it. That is what makes a good value-add property. Minimal structural works, a big internal floor plan, because when they value it at the end, they're going to value it based on internal square meters as well as, obviously, the block size. You want to make sure that it has character, so when you renovate it, it exacerbates that character, and obviously people pay a premium for it because it is scarce in nature. We want to make sure that the layout of the property, both externally and internally, are good, situated close to the front boundary, so your block is as big as possible. That is especially important if you have rear lane access, because obviously you have the most amount of usable space. And then location, pretty self-explanatory. Good suburb, that's the most important thing, and then try and get in the best spot of that suburb. The easiest way to work out where the best streets are in the suburb is to go to the sold section of realestateanddomain.com, go to the highest priced property, and then go search. And then what you will see is all of the highest priced sales, and they're not always going to be in this year. They could be from many years ago, but you'll generally see they will sit on like similar streets, right? Especially in normal residential blocks. Like most of the properties will be on similar streets. If you went and did that for Vaucluse or Bellevue Hill or Double Bay, for example, you went sold properties, most expensive, and then you got the list. Most of the properties, for example, in Bellevue Hill would be on places like Victoria Road. Most of the properties in Vaucluse would be places like Coolong Road, or they'd be Vaucluse Road, or places like that, Wentworth Road, because that's where the most expensive sales happen and they're the best streets. Cool. Very good. All right. Now, second thing we're going to talk through is negotiation. Negotiation. Okay. Now, most people, when they negotiate, they think about dumb things. They think about price, which is obviously important, but it's not the most important. They think about settlement time frame, and they generally think about it in the wrong context, because they'll think about it in like, oh, I want to get a 6-week or an 8-week settlement or a 30-day settlement. Again, probably the wrong context. They think about penalty interest moving from 10% to 6%. Why the fuck that even matters, I don't know. But like, if you go and work with any conveyancer, just any Joe Blow conveyancer, it'll take them 5 days to review a contract. They'll send their review across, and then they argue with the other side over like the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. So I'm going to show you what I focus on when I negotiate, and I can tell you it is not penalty interest. Okay? So I'll run you through 2 negotiations. I like the use of numbers with circling them, Joel. So the first one is 7.75 million office. Okay, which is mine. And the second one is our new, which is about to exchange in the next couple of days, a new wedding venue, which is 9 mil. Okay, so probably a little bit different from negotiating on a $650,000 townhouse, but this is the good shit. So let me start with the office building. Before I worried about price, I worried about. All right, let me do this. Let's do top 5. Okay, top 5 of how I negotiated. Can do. How's that? Good. So the first thing that I wanted to focus on in the negotiation of the office building was the settlement time frame. Okay. Now, the reason this was more important to me than anything else was because I have a lot of things going on at once. I have a lot of transactions which have happened and are going to settle, so I needed to understand when I could make this property settle. Okay, it couldn't settle at the start of next year because I have other settlements happening. I had to then work out when I was going to have the capital to make the settlement. And I also, because we're going to occupy this building, we're in another lease, which doesn't expire to the following, next year is 2026. It doesn't expire until 2027. So I was like, well, no, ideally I don't have to break a lease too early. I will have to break one, but not too early. So the most important thing with this transaction was settlement timeframe, both from a capital point of view and from a convenience point of view with occupying that building. Okay, so that's what I focused on first. Before I said how much is it, how much can we buy it for, I said, hey, what will the vendor do in terms of settlement? If he wants to settle in 6 weeks, I'm not the buyer for this thing because I can't do it. If he's open to settling in 6, 9, 12, 24 months, I could be the buyer. Okay, so I'll talk about settlement. But that was the first thing. The second thing was then price. Naturally, I don't want to pay stupid money for it. So I couldn't pay any money for it, though, if I couldn't get the right settlement terms. Hence the reason the settlement was more important. So it was settlement. Then it was price. Then what would I say the third most important factor of that was? So for me, it was probably then deposit. I didn't want to pay a standard 10% deposit if I was going to have a long settlement because I'm going to have all this money tied up for no reason. So I wanted deposit and I wanted to be able to put in as little money as I could, but then also make it tantalizing for the vendor. So deposit was the third one. Fourth one, access. So when you exchange on a property, I want to be able to get access to the property between exchange and between settlement so I can go and do my fit out and all this stuff before I then have the holding costs. Otherwise, I'm going to have to settle on the property, have then the holding costs, and then arrange access. And the fifth thing was, I don't know. I honestly don't know what the fifth thing was, but it had DA plans and stuff like that, which is really not a part of the negotiation, but it made me interested in the property for, I'll actually go through this first. What interested me in this property is that it's in a residential area, being Paddington. It's a heritage conservation area, which means trying to get a DA through is fucked up. And they had already gone through the process of getting an approval to add another level, to add a beautiful outdoor area. And to get the DA approved, it wasn't just submit to Wallara Council and then get an approval. It was submit to Wallara Council, all the neighbours complained. Then you had to go to Land and Environments Court and get it approved and win in Land and Environment Court, which was a big tick for me. Bang, they'd gone to the effort to do that. That's not just the time, but it takes a lot of your focus and time, which costs money. It's indirectly. If my focus is like going and dealing with all this shit, it costs money. So the DA approved plans. So we bought it at a 330 square meter internal, and we can turn it into, I think it's about 520, which means we're not going to grow out of this building anytime soon, which is a big tick for me. And I obviously have a building company so I can do the work myself. So that was the fifth thing, but it was a big value add for me. But it's not part of the negotiation. It just meant that I didn't have to go and do that stuff. And obviously all those DA plans come across to me. Now, the first thing, settlement time frame. I'm big with settlement on a lot of the transactions that I do. I'm settling on a property tomorrow that I bought back in January. What's that? That's like a 10-month settlement. And I put down a 5% deposit, which I'll get into the deposit thing. So I put 50 grand down to secure the property. I had 9 months to settle on it, which is a great use of my money. And obviously I don't have to settle on the property because I didn't need it between then and now. So settlement time frame is up for negotiation. When I say it's up for negotiation, I mean you can settle whenever you want. Okay, you can make outrageous settlement claims or requests, I should say, and they will accept it. Like I have settled on so many properties where I've had a 12-month term. Now, I'm not talking about everyday properties that go to market, sub $1 million properties. I'm talking about larger transactions, obviously. But settlement time frame is super important to me. I did buy one recently at $1 million, which I got, I think it was a 4 or 5 month settlement, which is still long for that kind of transaction. But it's always something that I talk about up front before price. I always say, hey, when do you need to settle? So for the $1 million transaction that I settled on, I needed to settle in the new financial year for a few reasons. And I said that up front before we spoke about price. I said, hey, just to let you know, I'm not going to be able to settle on this thing for like 4 or 5 months. So if you want to settle like within 6 weeks, I'm not your buyer. You tick that straight away. Boom. Awesome. You open a long settlement. Yes. Then you go to price. Okay. And like, you have to work out how much it's worth to you to get an extra settlement. Because if you're talking many, many, many millions of dollars in purchase price and in debt, that can be worth a lot of money. Like repayments on, $5 million loans per month can be $30,000 or $40,000. So if you can get 12 months, that's $500,000 in repayments that you're not having to pay. So Then you can go in with going price. Well, am I willing to pay a little bit more because I can get the right terms and secure this asset versus not get the right terms and have to pay a slightly lower price? And I'll talk through that in more detail in just a sec. But for settlement, the way that you generally get a longer settlement is to make it enticing for the vendor, right? So when I'm requesting longer settlement, I'll usually say that I'll give the release of the deposit to the vendor. So for example, on this purchase with the 7.35 million, the deposit was, 400 grand or whatever it was. And that was released to the vendor immediately. So we got 5%, he got 400 grand in his bank the day the deposit was paid. Good for the vendor, a little sugar hit. For really long settlements, this was a 10 or 11 month settlement. This doesn't settle until I think September, October next year. You can do a split deposit. So 5% on exchange, 5%, 50% of the way through the settlement period. That can also be good too if they say no just to the initial 5% up front. So settlement is where I always start. Then we go price. Like I said, I'm always probably willing to pay a little bit more for the property if I can get the correct terms, settlement terms and deposit terms, because having more money in my bank for longer is way more valuable than $50,000 or $100,000 extra in purchase price. And remember, when you're borrowing 70 or 80%, it's not actually $100,000. Although it is 100 grand and it's going to be added to your loan, it's not $100,000 of your money. For every $100,000 extra in purchase price, it's 20 or 30 grand of your own money, and the rest is the bank's money. And it doesn't really change your repayments all that much from my point of view. So price is then second. For that asset, same thing. I was like, somewhat fixated on price, but at the same token, I was like, well, how else am I going to buy this thing? Like, I want to be in Paddington. I love Paddington as a location. I want an office building close to where we are right now, near Five Ways. What else is there around for this price? And there's not much. So like, there wasn't a huge amount of comparables, but at the same token, I looked at it through the lens of like, if I don't buy this, what else is going to come up that's cheaper than it? And the reality was nothing that was as good as it. So price is price. Deposit, again, if you have longer settlements, you ideally don't want to have a huge amount of your money tied up in it for a few reasons. One, obviously, cash is good to have and use to grow businesses and all the rest of it. And the second reason is, with long settlements, shit can happen. Shit can happen. You can something can happen with your business, something can happen with your life, something can happen with the vendor. And let's say hypothetically settlement doesn't go through, you want to have as little of your own money on the line as you possibly can. Okay, now that's not always possible. But you want to have as little as your own money on the line as you possibly can. So if anything was to happen and they were to pursue you for the money, it's a legal battle is how I look at it versus just having the money there. So it's protection for you as the buyer, but it can be a good way to get the outcome that you want. Release of deposit is something that I use a lot. Like, I'll allow the deposit to get released to the vendor. They like it because they can go and do whatever they need to do with whatever money is there. And it doesn't matter to me whether it sits in a trust account or it gets used because I don't have the money anyway. So that's a big tick. Obviously, some conveyancers and solicitors may disagree with that, but at the end of the day, when it's in a trust account, it's no longer my money. So deposit. Then if I go for access, access is really important. When I talk about this next one, you'll see how important access is. And with the wedding venue that we bought a few years ago, same thing, access was very important. So getting into the property and having access to it like it is already yours. That's how I try to negotiate access. So for this one, a little bit different because the owner is still operating out of the premises. But when they leave, I want to have access to be able to go in and do my fit out and make it ours before we settle and have the repayment. So on settlement date, we can essentially move in. You can negotiate whatever access terms that you want. And in the next deal that I run you through, I've negotiated some killer access terms. With the wedding venue, we had full access to the property from the day that we exchanged all the way through until settlement like it was ours. We even had a wedding at the property before we had settled on it. So we had full access to the property to do all landscaping works we needed, to do any building works, to get deliveries. We were going there on weekends. What else do we have access for? We had full marketing rights of the property too, so we could start marketing it and getting bookings before we had settled on it. So again, very important. And to be honest, like, price then probably was down a little bit because I probably overpaid, or what seemed like I overpaid at the time. I paid $5.5 million for the farm, and previous to me buying it only a few years before it had sold for $3.5 million, so I paid a premium for it. But I can assure you the access, the deposit, and the settlement time frame that I got was worth a lot more to me than $1 million or 500 grand, whatever it was. And then, like I said, the DA plan. So they're the top 5 things I negotiate on when I'm doing bigger deals now. I know a lot of big developers and when they're acquiring sites, same thing. It's terms, right? They're putting generally options on sites, put and call options. They want to put down small amounts of money. They want access to the premises and the property, and they want to be able to go through and do as much as they possibly can, add as much value to that property as they possibly can with as little risk to them and as little capital as possible to them. So that's how I generally try and structure my negotiations when I'm not doing put and call options. Now, the next one. So let me run you through. This is the most recent wedding venue that we are in the process of buying. So here we go. It'll be a 9 mil purchase price. Okay, now if we do top. So, top 4 is settlement, access. Is access double C double S? You like that? Settlement, access, then price. Settlement, access, price, and deposit was probably less important with this one. So, with this property, settlement was really, really important because you probably, and I'm imagining, I've just bought another one for $7 million and I want this to settle after that one, right? So I haven't got all these things landing at the same time, both from a financing point of view and a capital allocation point of view. So settlement was the first thing that I did when I walked through the property. I loved it. I was like, hey man, what are the guys open to in terms of settlement? Because I can't do a quick settlement. No, they're open to long, like it doesn't really matter to them. So that was the big thing. So I think we have almost a 12-month settlement on this property. Okay. Second to the settlement, like I said in the last transaction, access. So with this, it's a staged access approach. From now until February, we have full access to do any planning, get measurements for materials, whatever it is. Full access to not do any works to the property, but to get everything ready to then start doing works. The second stage of access starts from February, and it is full access to do all works that we need to do to the property to get it ready to start having weddings as of September. So we had the access in 2 stages, which was like the first 4 months and then the last 8 months. So planning and then work. So we're going to go through and do all the work to the property, a huge amount of landscaping works to do, huge amount of internal works to do prior to settling on the property. So when we then settle, we can take bookings from day dot. Okay, so access was second in that transaction. And again, like we've got access like we own the property. Price, third thing. They wanted $10 million to begin with. They said I wasn't a $10 million buyer, so I'm probably not the buyer for it. But if they're open to some movement on that, I can make that work. Now, I worked out my price around, I've probably got a $10 million total budget for the wedding venue. I need to make that work. So depending on how much work I needed to do to the property would then dictate what I could spend on an actual venue. So $9 million was the agreed price, and I've worked out roughly there's $1 million of works to do to the property, which gets you $10 million all in. So that's how I worked it out. Trust me, there's no comparable sales for this property to say it's worth $9 million. But at the same token, to try and replace this property is impossible. It's a 200-year property, 200-year-old property. It's incredible, and I know the price we're going to be able to charge for weddings. So it wasn't about like, can I buy this at the same price as something else that's sold near it? It was, what is this property going to bring me in terms of long-term value versus what I'll have to pay today? That is how I looked at it. And obviously there's going to be some things that we need to do to make sure the valuations come back as close as possible to purchase price. But, price for me was to make the whole deal work in terms of my total budget versus what the property was actually worth to the public. And then deposit, same thing. 5% deposit I negotiated, nothing until settlement. There's no split deposits or anything like that, which is obviously a really, really good outcome. But this is really the 4 things that I focus on now when I'm doing deals. If I talk about my office building in Newcastle that we purchased, we had a long settlement arranged for that to begin with, lease back so we could operate out of it like we owned it. Again, that's the access piece. We've gone through and we've essentially got all of our concept plans done for a DA to build, a 7 or 8 story apartment building there. We've done all that stuff before we've even settled on the building. And again, the deposit amount was, as minimal as we possibly could do. So essentially what I'm saying is the way that I negotiate now with real estate is to be able to tie up the asset at today's price. And the price, again, is dictated based on a multitude of things, not just like comparable sales. Have access to it like I already own it. Ideally, create some value during that period of time, whether that's actual value in the property or whether that's value in my own life, so I can, advertise it for weddings and stuff like that. And then settle a long time down the track. And between now and then, work out how I'm going to pay for it. So that is how I focus on negotiations. Obviously, I think that you can negotiate much harder and do much more creative things at the higher purchase prices. When you've got lower dollar value properties, you can generally still negotiate on things like access. For example, if you want to go in and do renovation works prior to settlement, you could, negotiate access. Settlement periods, you can generally negotiate 3 to 6 months max. Or you can do things like rent backs, for example. Price is price. If they're competitive, you got to pay what the market's willing to pay. And deposit, we generally do a 5% deposit for the same reason. We don't want more money sitting in the trust account than there needs to be. But we don't focus on the little things. Like, I cannot tell you the last time my conveyancer said to me, "Oh, Jack, the penalty interest is this and this is that." It's like, it doesn't actually fucking matter, because with those things, from my point of view, that's worrying about saving pennies as opposed to focusing on making pounds. So I focus on making pounds, and I don't care about the pennies, because at the end of the day, there's a finite amount of money you can save, but there is an infinite amount of money that you can make. So that is how I negotiate on Property Deals 101. Now, what I forgot to be telling everyone is everyone needs to jump into the Q&A box and ask questions, because now's the exciting part, which is questions. Joel, how did I go there? What are we talking time frame in terms of explanation? Was that 40 minutes?
Yeah, you're at 40 minutes.
Do you like that?
Yeah, it's good shit.
Is there 2 20-minute YouTube videos in that?
Absolutely.
You like that shit? I was thinking about you all through that.
That's good.
Can I roast you like a Chinese duck? Fuck yeah, please do, Mr. Iceman. All right, questions. We got questions?
Yep. First home PPOR settles this month. Upper Coomera on the Gold Coast.
Yes, know it.
467 square meter block.
Yep.
2003 build, no renos done. Any tips on how to approach besides painting?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, like I said before, right? If you've got a property that's built in 2003, it's not old enough where everything is dated, but it's not new enough to look nice. So it's in that in between looks like horseshit period. And then the other thing that you will see is how much did they pay for that? Did they say, Joel? Not there. Let's just say it was in Coomera. You're probably paying, I don't know, $1 million or close enough to that. So $1 million, 2004 build property. Cool. And then you look at a brand new property today, for example, if they build a brand new one, and you might be, in for, let's say 1.6, 2025 build. Okay. Now the $1.6 million property is probably much bigger and much better, but it's built this year. 2004 is $1 million property. You can't really do all that much work to this property to add, let's say you spent 250 grand on it, you're in for 1.25. It's probably not going to be worth 1.35, 1.4, because a brand new property that's much bigger and better is worth 1.6. So there isn't the disparity there between new and old. Whereas, let's use New Lambton. We just spoke about Lambton before. You can buy an old shitter in New Lambton for say $950K to $1 million, and a brand new house might be worth $2.2 million. So there's much larger disparity. So that's what you want to make sure when you're doing renovations on properties, is that brand new or newly renovated properties, big disparity between, old shitters. Darren Liu, the great man, has joined the Instagram live. Darren Liu, one of the greatest brokers in the world. What's the next question, Big Joel? You're in. Yeah.
Could you please talk about multi-unit blocks? Would you rather buy a whole apartment block or several apartments separately?
Multi-apartment blocks. Would you rather buy a whole apartment blocks or individual apartments? So it's not an or question, it's an and, because both can be good. So let me run you through a run of my personal property strategies at the moment. This is a block, apartments. This is garaging down here. So this is a current block of apartments that I'm acquiring over time. Okay, it's a block of 6. It's on about 600 odd square meters of land on one of the best streets in Bar Beach, literally across the road from the ocean. Okay, the first apartment I bought was this one. Tick. The second apartment I bought was this one. The third apartment I bought was this one. And now I've got 3 more to get over time. Well, I really need to get 1 more, probably 2 more, and then I'll control strata and I can do really whatever the fuck I want. Now, it's not possible to buy this apartment block as a whole because it would mean every landlord would have to get together, every owner would have to get together and sell it as a whole, right? They're obviously all individually titled through strata as well. So that is why I'm buying them individually. Now, over time, it's like dollar cost averaging in shares, right? I bought this one at 660. I bought this one at 710. I bought this one at $1 million. Kicking myself. This sold for 630 only a few years ago. Fucking idiot I am. Should have bought it. Wasn't in the position to. Anyway. And then over time, like these will probably be the most expensive ones. They'll be probably $1.5 to $2 million a piece. This one will be, mid ones, I would say as well. So over time, I've acquired the block, and then like the blended average acquisition rate might be $1.2 million a piece. 6 of those, you're in for $7.2 million. But there would be zero way that I could acquire this block as a whole unless I paid stupid money from it, as a developer. You'd have to pay double or triple per apartment. I literally just had a call with a client who sold, they sold a block in Macleay Street, Potts Point. Pretty sure they got 81 million or something for the block, which was double what each apartment was worth or close enough to it. So the developer had to pay that, but the only reason the developer paid it was because it made sense to buy that site, right? This site would not make sense for that. It's just that I want the piece of land because there's no more land on that street that doesn't have a $10 million home on it. So that works. At the same token, we've also gone through, and recently, which is going to be a development site for us, and bought a block of 4 apartments, 1, 2, 3, 4, all on one title, not strated, and we bought them all at once. It was like just over a $2 million acquisition, and we're going to knock these down and build a duplex. So that was all purchased at one, but because they could not be sold individually, it was owned by one person, it was sold by one person, and we just were after the dirt that it was sitting on, not the apartment itself. So in short, both strategies work. I think when you're buying individual apartments like this, you need to do it in a block where it makes sense. I'm young, so I have so much time. These people are much older than me, so hopefully they die before I do, and I get to, if they won't sell it to me while they're alive, their estate will sell it to me. And it takes a long time. You see a lot of developers do this over many, many, many years. They get control of a building, and it's a long-term play, but when they get control, massive upside. Or if you're going to buy a full block, which is individually strated, you're going to have to buy it off someone who owns the whole thing individually as well. Generally, they're only going to sell it as a premium. But there is a few plays with these. You can do, for example, if they weren't at the floor to space ratio, nor were they at the height limit, you can add storage to the existing building, subject to getting all your engineering and making sure you can actually do it. I've actually done that. I bought an office building in Nora Head. Same thing. We can go 1 story higher. Probably doesn't make it feasible to do it, but you can do it because they're not at height yet. So there is a few plays with this. There generally has to be a long-term goal. If you're going to acquire apartments, you have to do it in a block where there's not 50 or 100 apartments because there's a lot of fucking people you got to win over. I've only got to win over 5 because I've already bought the first one many years ago, and I'm 3 out of the 6. So yeah, there you go. And then you can buy all full blocks, which are all on one title. You can strata them over time, potentially, so you have to run through and do your DD on that. There could be an upside there. Buy a block of 4 for $2 million, strata them. Don't know how much that'll cost, depending on your fire ratings and all the rest of it you got to do to it. But, for example, they could be worth $3.5 million individually, like 4 worth $3.5 million. You bought them for $2 million, and as long as there's margin in it from what it costs you to do it, that can also be a play. Uren, what is the next question? All right, well, lucky.
I've got some on the chat here.
All right, Jen.
Yep. So, currently negotiating with an agent in Bondi. Regarding purchase of an apartment, 2-bed, 1-bath, 1 car park.
Uh-huh.
Actually, we kind of covered this a little bit already, but any tips when negotiating as have the opportunity to buy before auction has value add potential?
Yeah, well, I mean, let me give you one of my biggest, frames when I'm negotiating. I negotiate with the frame of, if I plan to hold this property for 20 years, which is how I literally buy every property, I'm like, oh, I'm not going to sell this time for a long time unless I go bankrupt or I die or something. So I don't plan on selling it if I'm still happy and healthy and able. Am I going to be worried about in 20 years' time an extra $100,000 less or more? Probably not. And if I was asked in 20 years' time what I paid for a property, I probably wouldn't know. So I don't get caught up on the dollars and cents. Like, again, I focus long term. I go, does this property tick all the boxes? Is it in a great location? Does it appeal to the owner-occupied demographic? Is it going to be significantly more expensive in 5 years' time than it is right now? And if the answer to that question is yes, I buy it. That's it. I don't focus on, $50,000 here, $20,000 there. Who gives a fuck? No one. And I can assure you, if you're worried about making millions or tens of millions, you're not worried about saving $50,000 here or there. That is just a rounding error. So there you go. Serviceability is maxed out, yeah.
Save $200K to put towards a granny or use that to get another property. Thinking another property, but we'll wait until incubation stage to do the YAM potentially.
Say that again. He's going to save $200,000.
Yeah, either save $200K to put towards a granny or just use that to get another property.
Well, he's maxed at serviceability, right? So if you maxed at serviceability and you got $200,000, you're not going to be able to go buy another property because you've got no serviceability now, right? So, if you use the $200,000 to debt recycle, which means pay your existing debt down, hopefully it's non-deductible debt, you can then refinance it back out and that could increase capacity. I would also run some servicing calcs with your broker because what may seem like you're maxed out at the moment from a serviceability point of view may not actually be reality, because if you said to your broker, hey, I'm thinking about building a granny flat on this property, let me give you the rundown here. So serviceability, let's say this property's worth $1 million, and your broker says, hey, based on your current debt, let's say you got $600,000 of debt on this. Right, okay, so you're going to increase your capacity. Well, let's just forget about that for a minute. Let's say you got $600,000 in debt, $1 million in value. Your broker says, hey, you're capped based on this, and I'm assuming this is a investment property. The reason he's probably saying that you're capped is because this property is probably renting for $800 a week and he's using the rental income that's currently being generated. Now, the awesome thing about building a second dwelling is the property will no longer be renting for $800 a week as time goes on. So if you go through and you get a second little house approved, and that second little house also brings in $600 per week, guess what? That $600 per week gets added to this. And now when the broker runs your borrowing capacity limits, they're not running it on $800 per week. They're running it on $1,400 per week. And a lot of the time when we've seen or heard from people saying they're capped, they're not actually capped. They're capped based on current income. But if you can get an increase of $600 a week, that $600 a week should actually then give you enough serviceability to actually build this second dwelling for, say, $300K. So as long as you've got the money to get the approvals in place for that second dwelling, the projected rental income that'll come off it will then give you the serviceability to build it. And then that also then turns your $1 million property into what could be, a $1.45 million property. So all of a sudden you've just created $450,000 worth of value, not obviously all equity because you've got $300,000 of debt, but you've created $150,000 worth of equity, $450,000 worth of value, and then that property grows over a long period of time to be worth $3 million, let's say, in 10 years, versus this one growing to only being worth $2 million. So there you go. You've actually created, $1 million worth of value out of thin air, Joel. So Bob's your uncle. Next.
Would you still do that with the potential for wife having serviceability, or is that changing?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I would just get the broker to run servicing calculations. If your wife's going back to work, depending on how much she's going to be earning, I'm assuming maybe the reason she's not working, she's had kids, so you got dependents to worry about and all the rest of it. You just work out what the increase in servicing is going to be. But there's no reason why you couldn't do this and buy another property, because you don't need to use the $200,000 to build the granny. You can use debt. Mate, I got to answer Lachlan. He's me landscaper, little weapon down the river. Hendo, your weapon. Bit of a different question. What's your day-to-day schedule routine look like, work hours? Great question. So, Joel probably thinks I do fuck all. So, Joel, let me ask Joel what my day looks like. Joel, tell him what my day looks like.
Just calls and then more calls and then more calls and then keeping me waiting to start the live.
Yeah, that's right. I just do calls until I get to the office, until I leave the office, really. So let me run you through my schedule. So general week, over the last week, I've been getting up at like 5:30 because I've been, I got my 240K Ultra this week. But generally speaking, I wake at 4:30. From 4:30 to 6:30, I run or I train. And then from 6:30 to 8 a.m., I get ready. I go to the office. And I actually, tell a lie, there's one other thing I do in there. I have coffee at the Coop in Bronte. I get ready. I go to the office and I have breakfast. All that stuff happens between then. And then from 8 until probably 6, I would say, most days. 8 until 6, I have calls with clients. I have content that I need to do. I do team stuff, training, chatting, whatever it is. What else do I do during my day? I deal with issues, lots of issues. But that's generally from, like business stuff, YPO. Like I had YPO yesterday. I have EO. Just like business stuff, right? I'm doing client stuff. That's my main gig is client, staff. Do a lot of stuff with staff. Content is a big part of my day. Doesn't take a huge amount of my time, but it's still a big part of my day. It's something I do every day. I have business stuff that I do like YPO and EO. And then generally at 6, I will then leave the office. It doesn't take me very long to get home. And then, but like from 6 p.m. until 7:30, this is every night, I'll have dinner. And then I will generally watch or listen to some sort of content. Alex Hormozy, a podcast, a book, or something like that. And then between 7:30 and 8, I sleep. That is what I do. So between that time, I'm in bed at 7:30 or generally before 7:30. And by 8 p.m., I'm in bed. And then I wake up at 4:30 again and I do it all again. And I do that 7 days a week generally. So that is my day, every day. So yeah, I mean, really, when I think about my actual work day, it's broken down into sales. So if you think about, like, for me, sales is making sure clients are happy, making sure clients are buying property, buying more property, all that jazz. So it's like, it's doing the selling of our business and making our clients happy. I then have the marketing piece because I need people to know about our business. So I do marketing. Like this, for example, is adding value to people's lives, but it is also marketing for our business. So sales and marketing, and then recruitment. They're the 3 most important things in my sales, making sure the business still has revenue so we can survive and we live and people are happy and all the rest of it. Marketing, so people know who we are. And recruitment, so we have great people to do all these things. So they're the 3 things I focus on, and I do some more than others. Follow up, Joel, let's go.
Me, actually. How has that changed over time?
How has that changed over time? That's a great question. That has changed over time. Mate, I did a breakdown of this. So that has changed. If I go $0 in revenue to, say, 4 million in revenue, when we were 0 to 4 mil, I did everything. So I did like the actual selling on the phones, then the client servicing. So this was my everything era. You like that? Everything era. Sound like fucking Taylor Swift. And let's say then 4 mil to 10 mil. I did less, and then it was more about client fulfillment. So like people wanted to work with us because of Jack Henderson. So fulfillment, fulfill. Anyway, you get the point. And I moved away from selling. So I was no longer the guy on the phone and doing all the actual calls and selling. I only dealt with actual clients. So client fulfillment then was the biggest part of my day. Content has been sprinkled through this whole thing. And then from 10 to 20 mil, less client fulfillment and more team, and strategy, I would say. Strategy, team and strategy. And strategy, I find strategy is very hard. It's not like something you can sit down and go, all right, let's be strategic. It's just like when you have nothing to do in your calendar, that's when I generally have the best thoughts. So team and strategy. And then 20 mil to 40 mil is same thing, team and strategy. Strategy is a big part because you're thinking about like what's next. What else do I do? That's like now. This is now. That's how it's changed. Everything. I went from doing everything to just doing more client work and less selling to then doing not really a lot of like client fulfillment work. The team do that and I just lead the team and direct strategy. And then, yeah, now it's like it's probably the same thing, sort of team strategy and yeah, a lot like the strategic things we do now. The good thing is I can just come up with it, right? So I was like, oh, I want to try this new thing and do this new thing. And then the team go and implement. That's the great thing. Where before it was like, all right, I want to do this strategy. All right, now I got to fucking do it all. And it's harder to push forward. You know, like now I can be like with Ray, hey, let's try this new marketing thing. Let's run these new ads. Let's do this new creative. And all I got to do is shoot the creative. And then everything else happens in the background. So
someone else has asked a question which I think follows on quite nicely from that, which is, with all your financial success, why do you still work?
That is such a funny question. So, with all your financial success, why do you continue to work? So, here's how I used to think about money. I'm thinking about a good way to explain it. When you don't have a huge amount of money, or you have enough money but not enough to like not have to go to work, the thing that you really want is not, well, for me, I didn't realize until after the fact. It's not the fact that you don't want to go to work. It's the fact that you want to be able to choose. You want freedom. That's what you want. You want the feeling of knowing that you can get up in the morning and tell anyone in the world to get fucked. That's really what you want. So, like I have had so many friends sell businesses, have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, and they still get up and go to work every day because you feel lost, right? So you need a purpose. So, you know, I got to the point where I didn't need to listen to anyone, and that was a massive tick. So you've got this freedom now, this sense of like, cool, I'm now self-reliant. I don't require anyone to give me anything. I can do whatever I want whenever I want. And people actually now rely on me, which then gives you more of a sense of fulfillment. And then you're like, well, because you've gotten to that stage, right? Like it's not, if you win the lotto, it's probably a little bit different because you didn't do anything to win the lotto. You just got money. But when you have to earn the money, you then start to enjoy the process of like, wow, I've come from here to here to here, and you enjoy the journey. And then because you are making progress, like anything in your life, if you are making progress in a sport, or you are making progress in your job, or you are making progress in your relationship, or whatever it is, you want to do more of it because progress is fulfilling. So then you start to make more money because you're doing better. And then you're like, fuck, how big can I really take this? And then it becomes self-fulfilling and you want to do more of it. So it's less than about the money, although money is a very good scorecard as to how well you are doing. Obviously, when business revenue and business profit grows, it is a direct correlation to doing well in business. Like you're adding value to people's lives. But then you don't, because retiring is like, okay, I don't have to go to work. All right. I get up. What do I do? Like genuinely, what do you do if you don't have to go to work every day? You might be able to have a month off or 2 months off or 3 months off or 6 months off and travel and all the rest of it. But eventually what you are doing every single day just becomes like work. If you are traveling every single day because you do it every day, it becomes just like work. So you need like a level of fulfillment, and you then start to enjoy the game more. You don't have to worry about normal bills and shit, right? Like I'm not worried about putting fuel in my car or fucking what food or anything like that. I don't worry about that stuff now. And I don't know, it's just like more exciting. But I do remember when I was like, fuck yeah, I'd love to retire. My first goals list I wrote was semi-retirement. That's gay as fuck. So, yeah. Once you actually start to make money, you tick that box of freedom, bang, you don't listen to anyone anymore, and then you no longer want to not work. So hope that answered the question. Did that answer the question, Joel?
Yeah, I guess it does.
Thanks.
I got another question in the question box for you. Do you have to subdivide the land to perform the YAM, or can you just build the second dwelling on the one title?
good question. So when we're talking yam, block of land, house, yam. Okay? Now, in most instances, this is all on one title, which means if you sell the house, you're selling the whole thing. Okay? You're not having a yam and a house which are separate. They do have a fence that runs through the middle, which makes them separate. They're generally separately metered as well, but they all are on one title. This is for like the most part. Now, it does change council by council. So in some councils, for example, in Lake Macquarie Council, they have now recently made some planning changes that allows you to subdivide blocks of land, I believe, down to 250 square meters, which meant you actually could subdivide this off and have the yam separate to the house. But you'd have to weigh out what it costs versus what it would make you. How many people do you actually think would buy, a yam as an individual dwelling on its own title? Probably not that many. But there are some cool plays where, and I was only talking to a town planner about this the other day, where if you did actually subdivide the yam away from the house, what then happens is they become both on their own title, right? Which means they both then get their own valuations. Well, they get their own valuations, which means like there's value uplift. This might be worth, like, let's say as a house and a granny flat on one title, it might be worth 1.4 million. When it's subdivided, the house might be worth 1.1, but the granny flat might be worth 700, right? Let's just say. So now you've got a $1.8 million total val, and you can obviously refinance and cash out against that $1.8 million. So there are some cool things you can do like that, but I still think if you're going to sell them in the future, unless this yam was built like a small 2-bedroom house, which is not how we build them, like they look like a second dwelling, they don't look like an individual house, probably wouldn't make sense. But in short, you can do it, not with all councils, only with some councils, and generally when we do them, they are all on one title. Question?
Got, Jack, 180k usable equity. We will split it in 100 and, Jesus Christ, typing is fucked. We'll split it in 120k on investment and 60k for our house to fix up.
Right, so they're going to split the 180k that they've got as an equity release into 120 for an investment loan and then 60 grand for works. Yep.
And we can buy up to 600k. Where to buy and what between apartments or townhouse?
Yeah, it's a good question. 600 grand budget. It's a tough budget now in this current market.
Also, they did add, I do like the idea of a house with a granny on the back.
Yeah, not happening for 600 grand, that's for sure. I like fucking unicorns too, but if I just jam a fucking horn on a horse, it's not a unicorn. So 600 grand budget. It's a tight budget now. You would get in places like the Hunter Valley if you're in New South Wales. You might get into like a Cessnock or somewhere like that, a Musselbrook. Hey, tricky. You would leave that open. Yeah, it's hot. You would get into, places of regional Victoria. We don't buy there. I'm not saying it's not good to buy there, but we don't buy there. Even places like Ipswich now, you're not getting in there for 600 grand. So for a townhouse for 600, you'd get closer to Brizzy. You'd get in some parts of Newcastle, Central Coast. But I think I would rather you buy a house than a townhouse for 600 grand personally, maybe just a little bit further out. So, yeah.
Next one we've got sell investments to pay out PPR, then aggressively buy IP, or rent out PPR and rent vest. PPR 2.5 mil, 700k debt, 3 times investment, 4 million value, 2.9 mil debt. Could rent PPR 1,200 a week. Do you want to see this one? So you can see
Yeah, so what's the PPOR value? All right, so this is a great question. They're asking around principal place of residence, should they sell the investment to pay it off? So it's worth 2.5 mil. Val, the debt is 700, so like not a great deal of debt in comparison to the val. And then 3 investment properties, and then they've got 1, 2, 3. investments worth 4 mil in Val, and they've got 2.9 mil debt. So there's a few things you need to consider here, right? Because, and then this could rent for $1,200 per week, which would be $60K per year. And the interest repayment on this, let's just say it's 6% is 42,000, 42K, or roughly $850 a week. Yeah, per week. Cool. So there's a few things. Like generally, I would just say we want to clear this owner-occupier debt. Let's sell. We're going to cash out 1.1 mil minus our selling costs on $4 million, 2% 80 grand. So you're down to a mil. Minus CGT on a mil, 750K net. Let's just say round numbers. So you could get your 750, go down, bang, clear that. You're now debt free. And you know, good outcome, $2.5 million home, debt free, no investment properties. And then you would obviously refinance off this owner-occupier property and then, you know, go buy more investments, okay? You would eliminate a $700,000 debt and the repayment associated with that debt. So let's say it is $40,000 to $50,000 a year. You get $1,000 back into your pocket. So you're getting a win from a cash flow point of view. You eliminate debt and you also gain $1,000 a week or whatever the number is in cash flow, which means you can then use that cash flow that you're saving to obviously go and fund the investment purchases. The only thing I would consider though is to buy 3 investment properties. So let's say you bought them and they were $3.5 million, so they're $1.2 million a piece. Is there's a lot of entry costs and then exit costs to get out, right? So let's say you bought 3 houses worth $1.2 million each. Your stamp duty would be $60,000 times 3, which is 180 grand in stamps. That's a sunk cost, right? Because you're selling these now and then you're going to buy more. So 180 grand is going to piss down the drain. So again, you have to work out, well, if I can clear that debt today versus what it's going to take me to pay off, how much interest will I save if I pay that off today versus pay it off in, say, 10 years' time? Am I going to save 180 grand's worth of interest or not? So I'd work it out because you're definitely going to piss 180 grand's worth of interest down the drain with these 3 investments. You've then got the re-entry costs into the market, which you wouldn't have right now. And also, is there potentially one of these 3 properties that has the most amount of equity in it, which is a double-edged sword, because if it's got the most amount of equity in it, good chance it's performed the best, and then you would sell the best performing asset to then clear the owner-occupier or virtually clear all the owner-occupier. The other thing you would then do is obviously clear up, you know, your borrowing capacity. I'm assuming these are all bought in your personal name, which has pros and cons, just like buying in an entity has pros and cons, but you potentially get a larger portfolio. But the $700,000 worth of owner-occupier debt is probably not using up a huge amount of your servicing if you've already got 2.9 million worth of debt, so which will put you in like 3.5. So you would have to have $400-ish thousand worth of income to get this amount of debt, maybe more. So it could work. You could sell the investment. You could clear the owner-occupier debt, but remember, you're gonna fork out the 180 you paid in stamps plus the selling costs, the entry and exit costs. Is it actually worth getting rid of to get rid of this owner-occupier debt? How much money is it going to save you? How much money will that potentially make you down the track? Or is it best just to stay where you are right now and hold them, keep paying your owner-occupier debt, and then sell them down the track when you don't have to re-enter the market? So that's how I would think about it. You're in?
Quick one in the question box. What are your thoughts on the Sunshine Coast?
Thoughts on the Sunshine Coast are great market. Stay away from new builds. Go into established. Established is expensive in the sunny coast. Coolum, Maroochydore, all those places, amazing. Noosa, very expensive. But yeah, don't buy new, buy established.
In the process of buying first IP, are there any golden rules around negative cash flow, gearing /LVRs, or just focus on property fundamentals and sender? Got about 130K equity to play with.
Yeah, so the question was around buying first investment property. Are there any things that you need to worry about with negative gearing or shit like that, LVRs, or just send it. The answer to that question is, what people need to understand is property is not going to be the gateway to you becoming mega wealthy, right? The thing that's going to build the most amount of wealth is your ability to earn an income. So you've got two pieces. You've got income and you've got assets. This income over time fuels this. The more income, the more assets. The more income, the more assets. The more income, the more assets. And over time, this makes you lots of cash, okay? So what I focus on is use your 130K of income, equity, buy an asset, bang, awesome, great, negative cash flow, whatever it is going to cost some money. Over time, that value will increase, okay? It's going to become more expensive. The properties will grow. You just have to look over a long enough time horizon. But then once you've done this, don't just focus on the optimizing of that one property. Oh, can I do this? Can I somehow make it cheaper to own, put a granny? Go back now to income and go, okay, I've got my asset. What can I do to increase my income? Can I get an increase in my salary? Can I go and add more value to the company that I work for? Can I change careers? Whatever it is. Because the more you focus on this versus this, the more this will grow as a direct effect. So focus on income, that grows the assets, get the assets working, then go back to income. So that's what I would say.
Is 270K combined super a good start to get into commercial?
Probably not. 270K combined super. It's all relative to the individual, right? But $270,000 combined super would get you into $1 million commercial property at an 80% loan to value ratio. You got 200 for deposit, 50 or 60 for stamps, and a bit of money for the rest of the shit. So I wouldn't buy $1 million commercial property in short.
Cool. What are the best types of assets for cash flow? I know resi real estate is not the best for cash flow, more growth. When it's time to sell the resi, what should I buy?
The best kind of assets for cash flow, if we're talking real estate, is commercial, right? Commercial real estate provides the strongest net yields. You can get your 5, 6, 7% net yield. You can get assets where the tenant pays all the outgoings and you as a landlord have zero outgoings, like a childcare center, for example. But you generally want to be spending many millions on those things. Hence the reason I say focus on growing your residential portfolio first, because most people will never get the capital base to get into those really good assets. And then, there's lots of other cash flow producing assets outside of real estate, right? You can go and explore shares. You could go and explore private credit. You can go and explore so many different things which are really good for cash flow, but maybe not as good for growth. Shares could be good for both, depending on what you invest in. So it's not just all property. You can get a combination of assets that I think will build the best portfolio. 4 minutes and we're done.
Sweet. Okay, we'll do a bigger one then. Can you please walk us through the recent company structure you explained in, this is the video, I'm not sure which one.
The recent company structure, can you explain it in the recent video?
PTY Ltd to shareholder, trust, discretionary, or...
Fuck yeah, Joel. There we go. What do we got? And Kit, the fucking great man. Can you please walk us through the recent company structure in video? Priority limited to shareholder, trust, discretionary, or unit trust, trading companies when you trade in. And what is the rule around land tax threshold for New South Wales under family trust? Isn't the land tax from $0 threshold? Okay, Mr. And Kit, let's run it. So, few things. There's many different structures, okay? The one of the structures that I ran through recently was this. Proprietary limited company. You have you're down to what is trust, and then you have another PTY company, which is a trustee. So that's a trustee company. Okay, so you've got your proprietary limited company that buys the property. This is where the house lives. You've then got your trust, which is the shareholder of that proprietary limited company. And then that trust needs to have a company of which is the trustee. Okay, so there's two companies. One is just the trustee company. One is the company that holds the asset. And you have your trust. And let's just assume this is a discretionary trust. Okay, under this structure, you get a land tax threshold in New South Wales of $1,075,000. A new one Every time you set this structure up, you need to set up a new company, you need to set up a new trust, you need to set up a new trustee company. I'm not saying you should set up it. I'm saying you can get a new threshold if you set up this new thing every single time, okay? So in New South Wales, you can get a new threshold when you do this. There are pros and cons. You don't get a CGT discount in a company. You will be paying 30% on your gains. There's lots of other shit, okay? But that is how you get your land tax threshold new in New South Wales. For example, if you just did a discretionary trust and you bought the property in that discretionary trust and then you had a corporate trustee, under this scenario, you do not get a land tax threshold. You will pay land tax from $0. Okay, so under this threshold, under this, you have this is a discretionary trust. That's a trustee company. You will pay land tax. Under this structure, this is trust. That was a small trust. And this is a unit trust. And then you have a trustee company. You do get a land tax threshold because the unit holders are fixed. So let's say there's 100 units in the trust and there's one person in there. That person owns all of these units. That is very easy to see the ownership of that trust, which means you get a land tax threshold, but it is not a new one every time you do it. Okay, so there's lots of different things you need to consider. It's very complicated. Now, the structure that I spoke about, which I personally use, and the wedding venue example that I did before, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. So we have a proprietary limited company. This has the property in it. And then, like I said, this comes down to, it has a trust as the shareholder, and then you can distribute out of that trust to whoever the fuck you want. Okay, so this is where the company is owned. The reason I like to do it within a company structure is because this is my trading company over here. This is the one that makes all the money. And then if this needs money for something, works or deposits or cash flow, I can push it from one company to the other and stay within a 25% tax environment, okay? If this was owned in a trust, I would have to push to the trust and it would either have to come out as a Division 7A loan, which is a director's loan I would pay interest on and it needs to be repaid, or I would need to pay it out as a dividend to myself and individually, which would mean I'd pay 47 cents on the dollar, and then from the trust, I can obviously use that money. So not as efficient when you're running a trading entity, but like I said, in this, I pay capital gains tax at the highest rate. Sorry, not capital gains tax at the higher rate. I pay capital gains tax at 30% versus in a trust, when you sell it, you pay it at, a discounted rate, and you can push it out of the trust at that discounted rate. But I don't plan to sell these properties. These properties will produce lots of income. So it works for me, and then obviously you can push the income out into the trust and then push from there. So that is how I set things up. Not saying you should set things up like that, but it works if you've got a trading entity, and that trading entity earns a lot of money. All right, so there you go, and Kit. I hope that was valuable. All right, well, right.
Someone asked, what does the first meeting with Henderson look like from a client's perspective? What does the process look like from jumping on with Henderson into having a property yammified?
Fuck yeah. So the question was, what does it look like for a client to jump on with Henderson? So essentially, you'll go through our incredible team of sales professionals, and they will sell the fuck out of you. All right? That's what they'll do. I'm kidding. You'll obviously, you'll make sure that we're the right fit. We say no to way more people than we say yes to. And like when I say we say no to more people, we roughly generate 400-ish inbound inquiries per day. Calculate that over 30 days. What's that? 12,000 leads a month. And we bring on around 60 clients a month. So really low. Okay. And that's because we can't help a lot of people. We have a very select type of client. So if you are the right client for us and we're the right person or company for you, you then come on board. You then get onboarded by my incredible client success team, Luke and Jake and Anna. They onboard you. They get you onboarded to our client portal. They get you onboarded to our master plan software. We then refer you to all the people we need to refer you to, whether it be your brokers or accountants or all these awesome people in your team. Then we build out your portfolio plan, and then we go and say, okay, well, based on your finance strategy and your portfolio plan, we're going to go out there into the marketplace and we're going to buy you this kind of property to hit these goals, and we're going to yammify the fuck out of it. And then from there, we go out there, we find you the property. It's a great property. We've done all the feasibilities. You've got all the numbers. You're very excited. You sign the contract. Yay. Then Nick Shields gets involved and he says, hey, I'm the yam man. I'm going to now put a yam on the back of this property. And then he goes through and he's essentially the conduit between Henderson and Endeavour Build, and he makes sure that the approvals go smoothly. We get it approved. Then we take the approved plans back to our finance team. We get the construction finance. We build the yam. Then my asset management team jumps in. Zach goes, g'day, bro. How you going? I'm going to rent your property out for you. I want you to get you lots of money for it. Then you rent it out. And that's how you do it. So, love you, bro. What do you mean a few dollars? Someone give us money. Thank you. I'd rather you give it to charity than me, to be honest, but I'll probably give it to charity. But I'll give it to Joel instead. You want the money, Joel?
I'll give it to charity.
Fuck yeah, Joel. Thank you. That was great. All right, so that's what it looks like when you come as a client, and then I'm there just like, hey, how you going? And then at the Christmas party, we have a great time. We have lots of beer, and it's just a fucking good time. All right, so... And we do, yeah, there is a good chance that there will be a haka at the thing. All right, guys, that was awesome. Thank you. I did an hour and a half today.
That's good.
You excited?
Nice. We'll do another next week.
Yes, we will. We'll do another next week. I'm going to go and run 240 Ks now on Thursday and Friday. So wish me luck. Love you all. Ciao. Bye.